Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another session of hashtag Gather to Grow here with Food from Zanzi on Twitter Spaces. My name is Dawn Numdu. I'm your host for this evening. We basically talk about all things agriculture, and this week we're specifically focusing on Agri-Tech Apps that will level up your farming. And I've invited a few guests, and I'm so excited to have them here. I think I've been like their cheerleader for the week, like saying, hey guys, come, let's do this. So I'm really happy to have them with me and to be able to share more about what they do in the agri-tech space, what they've developed and how they work to support farmers, not only in South Africa, but all over Africa. So I'm so excited to have them with me. I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit about who they are, what they do in agriculture, and what they do in the agri-tech space. And I'm going to start with Samkelo Boy. Samkelo I met at our Farmers Inside Track Summit a few months ago, and I was like, wow, this guy is amazing. I have to have him back. Featured him on our weekly Farmers podcast. And this week he's with us here on Gather to Grow. Samkelo Boy is the co-founder of Abalusi. Samkelo, maybe just more about your agri-tech startup and what you do for the agricultural sector. Welcome.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Don. Our startup is basically working with livestock farmers and trying to bridge market access issues for them. And how we do this is through two ways. In one, ensuring that there is adequate record-keeping processes in place. And number two is looking at the compliance or requirements to be able to meet direct market access. So specifically looking within the livestock farmer sector, but trying to solve the market access issues and concerns.
Thank you so much, Samkelo, and I'm so happy to have you here and to be able to pick your brain and have you contribute to tonight's conversation. My next guest, I happen to meet through someone else that I know. I always find it so exciting in agriculture. You can ask someone, hey, do you know someone who does this? And they'll always have a contact for you and connect you to the most amazing people. Ryan Kayati is the founder of Farm Hut, and you're based in, I want to say Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe just more about you, what you do, what Farm Hut is all about. And welcome to Food from Zanzi's hashtag Gather to Grow.
Thank you so much. Farm Hut is based in Zimbabwe, and what we set out to do in the first place, no longer what we're doing, but then it's the beauty of the space. So what we currently are doing, anchored on 4 pillars, there's precision farming to do with crop yields calculators and input suggestion dependent on soil samples and types and even the regions our farmers are in. Then we're also into market integration. We've set up a system of supply chains. On the end of the supply chain, that's the restaurants, retailers, and the individual buyers also. Then we're also into climate mitigation and adaptation, where we're developing real-time weather updates and monitoring. Then lastly, we're also doing disease detection and prevention. And most of this is available on WhatsApp for our farmers. Thank you.
All I can say is, wow, Ryan. I knew that you were dynamic, but your offering is absolutely amazing. And I'm so happy to have you on board and have you contribute to the conversation. And this is what I really love about Twitter Spaces. It doesn't matter where you're at, where you're based, what you're doing. You can be here, you can be part of it, and we can all gather to grow for this amazing sector that we're in, and that's agriculture and food security. So thank you so much for being here. My next guest is Dr. Luke Metlekamp. Luke, it's such an honor to have you here. I think I met you when we were busy with our Google News Initiative project way back when. I think Ivor can remember and knows you well. Duncan, I think you've met as well, and they're also here in the space. I'm sure they're saying, hey, Luke. Dr. Luke, maybe just introduction of who you are, what you do in agriculture, and more about your app. But I know that you want to share some updates on it, but more it's about your research and the development aspects of your work.
Thanks, and it's so nice to be back. I'm a farmer and I'm an academic, and I'm, I suppose, a bit of a wannabe entrepreneur. I've been working in the kind of agricultural extension and education space for a lot of my career, and I think that's where it was a combination between that and me actually starting to try beginning my own farming journey that gave rise to Yebo Farmer, which is ag education app that we've been developing. It hasn't been easy, so I'm not going to pretend that it's all been smooth sailing, but really trying to kind of reimagine the agricultural extension and college system in a more kind of platform, peer-to-peer based approach. So puts a lot of power in farmers' hands about who and when they source extension support services from and how. So that's me in a nutshell, I suppose.
Thank you so much. And it's such an honor to have you here with me, and you're doing amazing work. And I'm just realizing now that I chose very specific people because you all, work in Agri-Tech, but in very different spaces. So I'm so happy to have you with me. My last and final guest is Julian Kanjeri. He is the co-founder of Footprints. Julian, welcome to Gather to Grow here with Food from Zanzi. It's such a pleasure to have you. I've seen your article. We featured you. You're doing amazing work within agriculture. Maybe just for those who might not know you, who you are and what you do in the agri-tech space.
My name is Julian. My background is software development and entrepreneurship. And with Footprint, what we're trying to do is, number one, help farmers improve with their record keeping. Just help them to answer this question of, if you're a farmer, what have you produced in the last 12 months or in the last 18 months? In what quantity? Who have you sold it to? We've got a WhatsApp chatbot that allows farmers to basically track their harvest and their production records. And then off the back of that, the idea is that we then connect them to markets, to services, and to information in the long run. But what we're trying to do is get to a point where we can connect these farmers to microfinance and insurance of this data that they're producing. So that's sort of like the North Star where we're trying to go. For now, what we help them with is record keeping, and we've got a platform that allows buyers to connect with them.
Oh, I think I definitely need more than an hour with these poor guests of mine, but I'm going to try and make the most of it. But maybe I should just start by, asking them, what does it mean when we refer to agri-tech? Because I think it's a word that's so often used, but what does it actually mean, especially for the newbies in the space? People just entering the agricultural sector, maybe they started their business recently, maybe they haven't even incorporated any kind of technology or use of any kind of technology on their farm, and they're looking to it, but they don't really know where to start. Ryan, I'm going to start with you. Thanks.
In most cases, many people seem to, get confused over, but it's very simple. So when it comes to agri-tech, it's short for agricultural technology. So it refers just to technology that you can use to increase efficiency and productivity in our operations. And in my case, with our farmers, it's their farming operations. So we deal mostly with precision farming. And when we're doing this now, we want to see exactly how we can get the most out of their soils, out of the seed of choice, etc. So how we do this now, that's when technology starts to come in. We want to see exactly how much is in the soil, how much they should put in, so that they don't put too little inputs or too many inputs into the soil, or non-required inputs as well. So we're just using tech to simplify processes that have been redundant over time. And we're also trying to make sure that they become more productive as they go over time. So it's the use of tech. It can be a mobile app. It can be a software. It can even be natural indigenous technology. But then as long as it solves and increases efficiency on the farm, it becomes a part of ag-tech.
Thanks, Ryan. And thank you so much for breaking that down for us. I remember a conversation with you, Samkelo, and maybe you can just comment on what Ryan is saying around, it will change from farmer to farmer. No farm will make use of the same kind of technology. So if you could just elaborate a little bit on that. I think that's definitely one of the things that you highlighted when we featured you on our Farmers Inside Track podcast, specifically on this topic.
I can only echo what Ryan has mentioned. And I think what we need to define when we speak of agri-tech is looking at technology-inclined solutions that speak to agri-business problems or agriculture problems. Solutions that are technology inclined that speak to a specific agricultural problem. So this could range from looking at market access issues to issues of efficiency or productivity. But I think the crux of this definition is in industry-specific solutions that not only apply, but are mainly tailored toward the agri-business portfolio or scheme of things. I agree with you again that not all solutions, speak to all farmers because, we have different scenarios and problems, use case of each farmer. So when they do apply or use these kind of solutions, they just need to keep that in mind.
Thanks, Samkelo. I'd like to bring Luke into the conversation and maybe just get his take on the question, and also just to comment on what you're saying about applying a specific agricultural technology to your farm based on what your need is and size of your farm, just as a farmer himself, how he approached it, especially with developing your app. And also, why did you decide to venture into it in the first place? Dr. Luke?
I think I really echo what the other two have said. And I think, for me, what's also, I think, really exciting and important to remember is that Agricultural technologies, it's nothing. If you think about ShopRite, if you think about Pick and Pay, those retail supermarkets would not be able to exist without very sophisticated digital inventory systems that help them track what's on their books, how much food is going where. What we're really talking about is AgTech 2.0. We're talking about this new revolution of the kind of democratization of agricultural technology. A lot of that kind of coming through, particularly in Africa and Southern Africa, through people's smartphones. I think what's exciting in the conversation around AgTech at the moment is really this thing of how much more accessible the kind of technology that was once only available to kind of big companies and big organizations is now coming into the hands of more and more people. And really what that opens up for thinking around more sustainable, more localized food systems, and really putting power in the hands of small and new farmers. And I think that's what's really exciting. And Ryan and Julian, both the use of things like WhatsApp. From some of the research we've been doing is really that very often the AgTech innovations that succeed best are really the ones that use the platforms that people are already using. And I think often as software developers and people that come with ideas, and I include myself in this because I tried to develop something from the ground up that didn't rely on one of these existing platforms. We want to develop something new. We want to bring a new product to market. Whereas often I think what's really most exciting in terms of this real grassroots movement around AgTech and small farms is how we reimagine and bootstrap and reinvent existing platforms like YouTube or WhatsApp or Facebook, because those are the platforms that people are already familiar with, they're already comfortable with, have the greatest number of users and the biggest chance to kind of connect people. So I think that's just my little plug or take on where AgTech is sitting at the moment. I was looking at some research that came out of, it was about a year and a half ago, saying, looking at how agricultural tech is being applied to farms in Africa, almost 70% of all ag tech currently is in the kind of new apps essentially being developed around agricultural advisory and information services, which I think is really interesting. And I think speaks to the scale of the need for kind of support on the ground and how we think about that. I think for me, really just this thing of using what's already out and this really exciting phase around AgTech 2.0 that we're in.
Definitely leads me into my next question, specifically around the fact that it is a growing segment, especially in the startup industry, and its aim is definitely to improve or disrupt the global food system and the agricultural industry as a whole. I think I've kind of got an idea of why you got into it, but I maybe like to also just find out from Julian why he decided to go into it. And then I think there's a tweet from one of our listeners, the farmer guy just tweeted to say if everyone can just list their applications on here for reference later. But Julian, maybe just your take on why you decided to venture into it and what are some of your challenges. Did you make use of existing platforms or did you start from scratch? Just comments on also what Dr. Luke is mentioning.
My journey was inspired by two things. The one is I've grown up with family that's involved in smallholder farming, right? Whether it's rearing of chickens or cabbages or tomatoes and the like. And I've seen some of the challenges that they've had with either getting access to loans or just being able to show what they've been producing, to be able to show if they're being profitable or not. So this is something that I've always been thinking about as I've engaged with some family. And then the second pillar that pushed me into this was coming from a software development background. I've always had a desire to say, how do we use technology to make people's lives better? But not just make people's lives better, but how do we focus on solutions that work for overlooked segments of the market, right? And agri being one of those. So about 2019, 2020, I was doing my master's at the University of Cape Town. And, one of the challenges was how do we use emerging technology like blockchain to come up with practical solutions in South Africa? And one of them was the agriculture space, is there room to bring some transparency, some traceability, financing and insurance, specifically for smallholder farmers. And you looked at the landscape and we saw some solutions. There's one solution called IBM Food Trust, which is being used overseas with Walmarts, the likes of the Walmarts and farmers that they work with. But those solutions were very much tailored for a European or Western market for large commercial farmers. And looking at the smallholder space or the emerging farmer space in sub-Saharan Africa, this was not the case. So this was sort of the driving force here to say, how do we build something that's relevant locally or regionally and tailor it in a way that's accessible, which is why we've sort of ended up now with this WhatsApp interface to say that this is what works for sub-Saharan Africa. So we built from scratch, but along the way, we've taken learnings from the community, started off with the web application, the web-based application, but eventually we ended up on WhatsApp. And the reason why we went with WhatsApp is We went out, we engaged with farmers, and they said that the 2 applications on their mobile phones that they would not delete if they were running out of space or something is they would not delete Facebook and they would not delete WhatsApp. Try and convince them to download something else that's just a bigger ask. But these 2 applications they would not delete. So our choice was either build on Facebook or build on WhatsApp. And what I don't need to teach my grandmother, for example, how to use WhatsApp. She will at the least be able to respond to a message, or if she can't, there's somebody in the household who can help her to respond to a message. And that's how I got into this space, the motivate and why we've gone the direction that we've gone.
Absolutely amazing. So maybe just one other aspect is while prepping for this session, I read that Kenya and Nigeria dominate the agri-tech market at the moment, with Ghana being third. Apparently, these 3 countries alone make up for more than 60% of the active agri-tech startups in Africa. Do you guys agree with this list? Could you maybe talk about some of your competitors? What's your take on it? What's working in these countries? And how can we level up in Mzansi? Samkelo, maybe I can start with you because you're based here. You're just starting out. How do we compare and how do we level up?
I would agree with that sentiment in terms of the amount of startups that are specific in the agri-tech space for other countries. And with South Africa, it's slightly different. And that's because of the type of, I'd say, economic dynamics when it comes to these aspects. A lot of these countries that you do mention, the smallholders play a large portion of the agricultural produce within those respective countries. And there's more, I'd say, supportive processes to help develop solutions that are inclusive for smallholder farmers. And where we find in South Africa, we have this dual economy where we have commercial farmers and smallholder farmers. And when you look at commercial farmers, they're quite matured in the type of technologies that they're using to help them become more effective, efficient, and more productive. But on a smallholder farmer side, we lagging behind. So if we do compare the smallholder farmers' usage of technology or agri-tech type platforms versus other countries, I'd say we definitely have a long way to go. But now, as we're seeing in South Africa, there's more interest of technologies that are more well-rounded and inclusive. The likes of Kula, we have Hello Choice, and then many other technologies that are now looking at what type of issues and challenges are specifically tailored to smallholder farmers, because we believe that they have a bigger role to play than they are today.
And I couldn't agree more. I think that's also our sentiment at Food for Mzansi. Luke, I think you're also working in this space. Do you share some Samkelo's sentiments? How do you feel about us leveling up and how we compare to the rest of Africa? What do you think we should be doing better?
I really do echo what Samkelo is saying. I think the structure of our agricultural system is so different, and that it's shaped the way that our agricultural technology offerings have evolved. And I think that's not to say that we don't have a lot of very cutting edge ag tech in South Africa, but it's a smaller handful of companies that are doing, a smaller number of very high value offerings, rather than, I think if you look at much more fragmented markets, places like Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Kenya, Tanzania, there's a lot of products coming onto the market trying to serve a very large number of people. I think it's a little bit of it's a result of not just what our farming system looks like, but also what our retail system looks like. There's a lot of offerings that have come on board in East Africa that are also looking at the kind of market and retail side. I think for us, we're so dominated by big retailers that it's so harder for new apps to come in. And where the edge really is with that, and really the competitive advantage is with that, is building on this idea of what localized food systems and localized food economies mean. And I think that's really where we're going to have a competitive edge, and where a small scale ag tech is going to have a competitive edge over, the large scale ag tech that the ZZ2s and the ShopRites use to manage their operations. So I think that's a really exciting space to be working into for us as South African.
Thanks, Luke. Appreciate that. Ryan, just your take as someone that's not based in South Africa, maybe just how you set up your business, some of your competitors, how you sort of navigated the space to get to where you are in your business.
On your first question, I agree with Samkelo and Luke. And I also agree with it's actually fact that Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana are leading in this sector. We're operational in Zimbabwe, and just recently I found out that the entire population of our country is equal to the population of Lagos. So I would really expect a lot of solutions to be coming out of these 3 top countries. But then in Zimbabwe, I think it's a bit different from South Africa, where there's so many commercial farmers and there's also big retailer groupings. So you'd find that in Zimbabwe now it's a bit more disorganized than that. So you find most of these retailers procure from different number of farmers, You also have higher demand from physical markets that are still very much operational. Then you also still have individual vendors that sell vegetables on streets, which is very popular as well. So as we got into the market, it wasn't really difficult because we had a lot of entry points and not one person was dominating or is actually now dominating this entire space, in as much as we don't have comparable populations to South Africa and Nigeria, etc. I do believe that as we're getting into this new age of Agri-Tech, the 2.0, we're going to be seeing more solutions cropping up, and we're going to actually be seeing most of the challenges that our dear farmers are actually facing right now becoming done and actually getting solved as we go on. Actually positive on that.
Thanks, Ryan. One of my favorite agronomists from the Western Cape, Wafik Esso, believes that technological integration holds exciting possibilities for farmers. And of course, this is partly why I invited our speakers here tonight. So maybe I'll start with a breakdown of their applications and what it specifically offers farmers. We can just spend a few minutes focused on that. They did the introductions in the beginning, but I'm going to ask them just to, again, talk a little bit more about what it does and how they've developed it over time, also when it started and what they learned from it, and some feedback maybe from the people that's actively using it as we go along. Julian, I think you're first up, and then we'll just go through the list from there.
Just to take a step back, previous question about the different markets and the like, just a quick comment on that. One of the things that we've struggled with getting some sort of traction in South Africa, because the different entities we engage with, agri-hubs, aggregators, and so forth, they will express interest, and it's just getting to that final push. It's as if something has just been missing, right? Like either the technology is untrusted or there's just a hesitation to try something different. And so we've actually now been trying to get into Uganda, which is also on that East African curve. I think possibly not as advanced as Kenya and Nigeria, but certainly Uganda, about 80% of their economy is agriculture based. And we're getting more traction to run some pilots there. If there's something that South Africa could do, maybe it's a bit more openness to technology and trying out solutions to help. And possibly also maybe just some intervention from a government level or something to try and push the sector forward. That was a quick detour.
Yeah, no, definitely no worries about it. I think maybe that's also because what I like to do on this platform is to, in maybe a few months' time or, by this time next year, I invite you back and we kind of map your progress and also see how we can get other, players involved. And if there's a suggestion from your side to say, hey, how do we get government involved in this? Then speak to government and say, hey, come on board. Let's see how we can work with these people, and see how we can take it forward. So I'm noting that one, Julian. You're still up for your app and what you offer farmers. And if you could just break that down for us. Thanks.
For our app, I think the sort of underlying idea is purely if we're going to help improve efficiencies for smallholder farmers and for the supply chain in general, we're looking at it from a data perspective to say, if you're a farmer, do we have data on what you're doing? Can we get that data to the relevant person, whether that is a buyer, whether that is an insurance provider, and so forth? So the first thing for us is, can we help farmers to record what they're producing, right? So at the end of the day, what a farmer will be able to get once they've used our chatbot is they can get a PDF, which basically is their production record. You can think of this maybe similar to a credit history or something, but there's a production record which just shows this farmer's production over the time that they've been using our platform. The idea is that this would then be used by other players downstream, whether that's insurance, to say, this person's applying for microinsurance. This is what they produced in the past. This is the current weather data in their region, whether it's weather index insurance or something, and then use a combination of that to help to manage risk for the farmer. So the first thing is let's get the data on the farmer. Who is this farmer? What are they farming, and so forth. And then the next thing is, can we also help these farmers with getting an idea of what market prices in their region are? If you're a farmer in the Western Cape, if you're a farmer in Gauteng, wherever you're at, can you get an indication of what the current prices in the market are? And this is not to say that we're guaranteeing a price for the farmer's produce, but it's just a way for the farmer to be better informed when they're trying to sell their produce, that, how far off are they from the average price in the market. So we help them to do this via WhatsApp. On the other side, if you are a buyer that wants to buy produce, then the idea is that using a marketplace that already developed, you'd be able to get in and say that this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for this commodity in this quantity. And if somebody can meet that need, then they can respond and say that, yes, we can supply this. Or if somebody has excess produce that they need to offload onto the market, it's captured onto the platform, and buyer can also just come and accept a sell offer that would have been posted by a farmer. So the initial part is record keeping, some market access, but where we really want to take it is the insurance and finance, and this would be leveraging blockchain technology.
Thank you so much, Julian. So if you'd like to reach out to him, he posted his details on the tweets there as part of the space. Absolutely amazing work. Samkela, I'm going to give you the floor.
So our platform seeks to solve one big issue of farmers or livestock farmers being able to articulate the value of their produce. The reason why is not because they don't have valuable beef or sheep commodities. It's just they cannot show it to the people who need to know. So an example of this is that you'd get farmers who would invest in buying good breed cattle, for example, but when they do decide to sell them, they sell to their neighbors or someone who wants to buy for a wedding, etc. And they don't really get the true value of what they have. And what we're saying or what we're putting to the table is to provide a record keeping system, and in conjunction to that, have then the required compliance officers to articulate or validate the produce that is uploaded on our system. And inevitably, the latter then would be to connect them directly to the buyers, be it individual buyers or businesses and corporates. One challenge that we're also trying to resolve is the challenge of not being able to access resources. So, for example, now you are in this remote area, you have this high quality livestock or bull, but you cannot get it to your customers. So what we're trying to do is through our ecosystem is to try and alleviate blockers that become an hindrance for farmers to be able to sell.
Absolutely amazing, and everything of the best with your venture and the way forward, Samkelo. I see we have Duncan Masiwa, who is the head of news at Food for Mzansi, who'd like to contribute or add to the conversation. He used to co-host these sessions with me, and I miss him so much. So when he decides to join me, I'm just like, yay! Duncan, the floor is yours. You can ask your question, and then we'll go on to Luke and Ryan after we've taken some questions from our speakers. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, Dawn, and also for the conversation. It's a very important conversation, especially considering the future of agriculture. It's great to hear all the products and the services that are available to farmers. But I think Mzansi's farmers are faced with a completely new reality. Not entirely new, but it's hitting us where it's hurting the most. And that is, of course, load shedding. My question would be, how are agricultural technologies adapting to this new reality for farmers, if that's at all possible?
Very important question. Thank you, Duncan. And I was hoping to touch on that towards the end, but I'm so happy that you brought it up now. I'm going to take one other question from Astrid. Would you like to contribute, ask a question, be part of the conversation? The floor is yours. Thanks. Astrid, would you like to ask a question to our speakers, contribute? Otherwise, I will give Nomaliso a chance.
From off the top of my head, I think pull down any really clear examples around how ag tech is really helping to overcome that load shedding challenge. I mean, I think there's some conversations or some thinking around, what it means to be not just thinking about internet technologies and smartphone technologies and agricultural technology, but also thinking about renewable energy and like decentralized energy as an agricultural technology and agricultural solution that maybe should be part of this wider conversation around ag tech. It's not just, maybe it's not just smartphones we're talking about. It's not just how people access the internet and web of things, but it's how we generate energy on our farms. It's pump energy. It's how we pump water. It's maybe, thinking about soil probes and how we expand access to those kind of things. Coming to the load shedding question, that's I think increasingly the question is, how do we help people get off ESCOM? How do we help people become more energy independent? And maybe that's where we need to be thinking around this conversation. I think there's also a point in some ways links to this, because it speaks to this question of how we access the resources we need, whether it's electricity or otherwise, to drive, this agricultural technology innovation. And the other one is data. It's data on our cell phones, and it's the cost of data. And I think this kind of question about how we use emerging data-free or reverse charge data systems, and I see Anika's on the call here too, and she's been a little bit involved in that. We really need to be rethinking about how we are developing our apps to be removing the data burden from farmers who've already got so many costs, and for whom, even some relatively small costs of data are significant. And I think there's really exciting stuff happening in that arena too. So between that and maybe some more decentralized energy, we can work into some new and creative spaces.
I'm realizing as this conversation is going on that I need to have a part 2 on this topic. And I know that farmers have been calling me to say, Dawn, you need to have a space on farming off the grid. We've had one before, but I think I'm going to do a recap on that session and then invite more people to come and talk on that, because it's a real struggle for farmers, and we know this because we live here. Nomaliso, the floor is yours. Would you like to ask a question, contribute, ask something of our speakers? The floor is yours.
My name is Nomaliso Msasiwa. I'm a managing director for a Zimbabwean startup called Fresh in a Box. And I wanted to ask directly to Julian that does your WhatsApp-based platform, is it a white label or does it have API that can collaborate with other startups? So we've 2,500 plus smallholder farmers in Zimbabwe. And I guess everything else I've used on the back end, because our solution is more e-commerce customer face fronting. But when we work with smallholder farmers, we've had to use a lot of systems that are more rudimentary and stuff. And I was wondering that, would your system collaborate with other startups for us to enable more tech development on the side of managing farmers?
Thanks, Nomaliso. Julian, your response? And I think Ryan can also speak to that.
We do have an API that sort of allows for integration with external systems, but we haven't gotten to the point where we've had someone that's interested in sort of using that API. So maybe that's something that we can certainly chat about and see how ultimately, the idea is, can we make a difference to farmers?
Shiva Prashad, the floor is yours.
So I come from India. We run a fintech startup over here. My question is more to understand the financing of how a farmer gets access to credit in South Africa or Africa, and what does it entail in terms of getting access to credit before you harvest or start plowing, and then how does the farmer be able to repay the access to credit? Is it part of the yield that they produce at farm gate and they're able to create a derivative and sell it to other B2B entities, or how is that particular structure? Because we have innovated a lot of work in India, and we'd love to exchange some ideas.
Thank you so much, Shiva, for your comment. Anyone in the space like to respond to his question?
I'm happy to speak more towards insurance and less towards finance. So the one aspect of insurance that we're really interested in is this idea of weather index insurance, where you have an insurance policy that pays out based on weather events. So if the rainfall in a specific area is below certain thresholds, then the farmers that are subscribed to this policy will receive a payout. And specifically, like in East Africa, how they're working with this is farmers buying inputs. The sort of insurance premium is loaded into the cost of that input, and they'll get a unique code that is normally in the bag of inputs, and that is like the reference that they end up using to track the policy. And then there's other companies that are starting to look at building on top of that and then using blockchain technology to try and have payouts directly to the farmers. That's the sort of model that we are interested in from an insurance point of view. And maybe someone else can speak towards the finance side of things and maybe offtake contracts.
I can jump in a little bit on some of the finance stuff. And this is where, listening to Julian, your work around record keeping was just music to my ears, because I think so much of this comes back to how we cost effectively de-risk a very large number of farmers for whom it's not financially feasible for a lender to be going out and doing a detailed assessment of the risk of a particular farmer. So I think we need to be thinking about new ways of de-risking access to credit. And for me, there's a few layers to this. And I think the one that Yebo Farm and the work we've been doing more from a kind of knowledge and skills perspective speaks to is, what access to extension support and what access to knowledge and what skills are underpinning a farmer's operation. Then there's a question of what are the soils, what's kind of ecological system and the ecological capital that's underpinning this operation. A lot of us are probably doing around supporting access to scientific services, soil sampling and those kind of things, and understanding, what's the farmer working with. And then it's also, like as Julian's been saying, these kind of track records around that really require detailed record keeping on production records and, sales records, ability to get things to market. And I think if you look at that as a package and see that as an ability through a bundled app or a set of apps that maybe speak to each other a little bit, that there's an ability to offer a data set to people that are offering credit to farmers. I do have there's a reservation in me too around that though, because I think so often I would hate to see this kind of next round of ag tech just providing a kind of doorway and an avenue in for, the large agri-chemical dealers of the world to, kind of pave the marketing pathway for them and make their job a lot easier. Whereas I think we need to be looking at a slightly different, kind of often more sustainable approach. And I'm not saying we're not using fertilizers, but I think often this question of de-risking finance is just a way of helping to. The risk is it puts farmers at increased risk of debt and exposure to debt. And I think, there's a huge experience from the Indian perspective of, some of the challenges of that and what that means, and farmer debt and farmer suicide and a lot of the darker sides of that too. So I think there's another question or conversation also to be had around what it means to pave the way for increased access to credit. And I'm not against it at all, but I think we just need to be thinking about the light and the dark side of that.
No, absolutely. I think giving access to credit is only to kickstart their operations, or having access to even for small rich farmers, just giving them access to so they kick off. But I think what is more important is post-credit. Like after you give the credit, what actually happens in terms of understanding their yield, whether in terms of weather or in terms of productivity. And record keeping is another big area where digitization and technology would definitely play a big role.
The big question is pre-credit. What's the business plan and what's the production plan for a particular season that is informing that need for credit? How well has that been thought through? What are the risks involved? So I think that's where we, through Yerba Farmer, have tried to be putting a bit more of our attention, is saying maybe there's a pathway to access to credit that involves approval through, if you've passed the gateway of having soil samples done and you've worked on a production plan with an agronomist of your choice. Those are some gateways that you pass through in that journey to access credit that also helps to kind of take the risk off the farmer, No,
absolutely. I think that's where education comes into play, right? Literally trying to figure out the landlock, the location, and what is the best crop that you can have to get the best yield out of it, right? I think most of the farmers don't even understand that perspective of what is the best crop I should have in a certain geographical location to get the best outcome from it, right? So I think pre-credit education and then hand-holding them during credit and post-credit, whether it is through harvesting or market linkage for their produce to actually get into the market. And then having a very good derivative for them to leverage, whatever their efforts are. I think I can tell you about India where we are doing multiple things. I think the pre-credit education is the key. There are some direct benefit transfers which are given by the government directly to the farmer. And there are smaller institutions or a micro-level institution set up at a very local level to educate the farmer on that particular geographic location. And normalizing the fertilizers also was a big thing, right? Because there are so many companies producing their own chemicals and fertilizers and trying to get a larger market share. To normalize which chemical is actually required for which crop, into which area, that education, and then understanding the yield side of it. That's also very important. And then building the channels across. Credit is only an instrument for them to get access to, let's say, the inputs of what they have to kick off, right? But I think that's also a very critical component for them to be successful. But more important is education, awareness, and then what actually happens post-yield, where I might have put in a lot of effort in building a certain crop, but am I getting the return of investment of my effort, right? So market linkage, I think, is a larger problem to solve, apart from credit as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shiva and Luke. You've really taken this conversation to the next level. And I said this earlier, I'm going to definitely have a part 2 on this. Shiva, I'm going to invite you back. I've already stalked you. So please expect me to slide into your DMs and have you back for another conversation.
For sure.
And so many more. Thank you so much for being here. I'm literally getting teary-eyed just thinking about how amazing this platform is and how much I enjoy engaging with people from all over the world. So thank you so much for being here. I think we've established a number of things, but I know that, Luke, you haven't told me about your app.
Yerba Farmer, in a nutshell, What we've done is we've recruited a range of agronomists, vets, other farmers. We've got soil labs on the platform. And it's basically a place where farmers can come and access, they can browse through menus of different advisors. They can filter by the crops they're farming, the areas they're farming in, the type of problem they're facing. And what we're trying to do is essentially create a channel where either farmers can load credit on themselves, or an estate extension service or a retailer who's wanting to work with a certain segment of farmers can come and load credit onto farmers' accounts. And instead of a ShopRite coming in and saying, we're going to employ an extension worker to work with this network of farmers, or a Department of Agriculture coming in to say, we're going to allocate, farmers in this area as this particular extension worker, it puts the money into farmers' pockets and lets them choose who and when they source support from. And that support can largely take place over, WhatsApp video calls or WhatsApp chats, but it also allows farmers to request in-person visits in certain situations. And really what we're trying to do is cut the cost of an extension engagement down radically and bring on a kind of growing pool of qualified and experienced extension workers into the agricultural support system, and providing a degree of accountability too, where farmers are able to rate the level of support they get from an extension worker that they've engaged with. A little bit like Uber for agricultural extension. So it's a platform-based model. Advisors register on the platform, and then farmers use and then rate those advisors. And we've managed to put on a really exciting and amazing kind of very experienced faculty of advisors onto the platform, offering support at very low costs. That's Yobo Farmer in a nutshell.
Thank you so much, Luke. And I think we've run through everyone. Ryan, I think, had to drop. Might have been connectivity. Julian, you shared yours. Samkelo, if I missed you, I think you were second and then Luke was third. Ryan is no longer with us, but I'm hoping that you guys can connect with more of what they do on their website. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of tonight's conversation. I think we've established that it's no secret that the growing use of tech applications, everything from soil testing and drone technology through to microcredit and microinsurance availability, is looking to increase the overall productivity of the agricultural sector as a whole. And I think our speakers here tonight are living proof of it. But what does the next 10 to 20 years look like? And how do you see yourselves growing in your own agri-tech businesses, in the agricultural space? Maybe I'll go Julian, Luke, and then Samkelo can have the last word. Thanks.
Yes, I think the next 10 to 20 years, just going back to the idea of data being everything, is this idea of you can connect with a farmer, you can connect with the food you're buying, basically anything in the food space digitally, right? So you can see where this is coming from, where was it grown, how was it harvested. You can send, if you wanted to support a farmer with a donation, a once-off donation or something, you can send that to them. Basically think about the same way that we can buy electricity, electricity tokens, prepaid electricity, whether it's via USSD or mobile app or something. I think basically seeing agriculture moving into the space where it's increasingly digital and more efficient and everybody's winning, where we want to see things going.
I want to make a positive projection, which I think we're going to see it moving in an increasingly peer-to-peer space. The Facebooks, the YouTubes, these platforms where people are exchanging peer-to-peer. I think the power of that is already dwarfs a lot of these kind of formal offerings that are on the market, and it's invisible and it's unseen very often. I'm really hoping that this drives a more localized push and really supports people to be engaging and buying and selling food more locally at a more local level, and it builds this kind of vibrant growth within the informal economy in South Africa. That's what I'd love to see.
Absolutely amazing. Samkelo, you have the last word. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I can only echo what both speakers have mentioned. But I think in addition, I really see cross-pollination across industries. So integration with agriculture and also other industries like retail, etc. And also the heavy emphasis on how technology can support sustainable practices in farming. That's one in a nutshell.
Thanks. Nomaliso, you want to add a comment?
Just a quick one, guys. As a way of agri-tech space, right? Also be in a space where we talk about platforms that actually work. And just in general, when we go through some of our platforms, there's still glitches and stuff. And I think that's why even the conversation around investment in our sort of startups becomes very difficult, because there's no working prototypes of some of the work that we're doing. And I think this is an encouragement for the year and the futures that we're trying to build, is that for farmers to engage with us, mostly they want systems that work. And the moment somebody hits the first brick wall of just signing up onto your platform, you never get them back because they don't believe in what solution you're trying to bring. And I think that it takes being one to know how to address farmers' needs. And I hear everybody talking about how their solution is geared up for a smallholder farmer. And I think that let's continue to grow solutions for farmers, but also become one to understand the needs of a farmer so that you are able to produce systems and agri-tech solutions that are functional and that work to serve the kind of customers that you want to work with. And yeah, that's all I have to say in the spirit of growing each other and growing the space and the community. Let's build things that actually work.
And Nomalisa, you're also on my list for the next session, because another issue is I struggle to find women in agri-tech. I was like, no, how can I not have one female representative here? So if any of my speakers have a woman working in agri-tech, please do send me a message, connect me, because I want to invite her to the next space. Okay, we have run out of time. That's it for now. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you to all my speakers. Thank you to everyone who contributed. It's been so lovely. I'll be back next week, same time, same space here with #GatherToGrow on Food from Mzansi's Twitter Spaces. From me, Dawn Numdu. Bye for now. Have a lovely evening and happy